he was dying. The same man who once chained me to a post and whipped me until my back resembled raw meat was now reduced to begging for a sip of water. Colonel Marcus Whitfield, the devil incarnate, crawled through the harsh Arizona sand like a wounded beast. 3 days ago, I had been riding westward toward California, finally tasting freedom after 35 years of unrelenting hell. The war was over, Lincoln had proclaimed our emancipation, and I possessed only the clothes on my back and a stolen horse beneath me. Yet, freedom held a hollow taste when there was nowhere to go and nobody awaiting my return. That's when I witnessed the smoke ascending from behind the crimson rocks. A weak, intermittent plume. My instinct screamed at me to continue riding, but curiosity, that treacherous mistress, had claimed more than just feline lives in this desolate landscape. I tethered my horse to a gnarled mesquite bush and advanced cautiously, half expecting to find the charred remains of wagons and scattered bones. Instead, I discovered him. Marcus Whitfield, dragging his broken form across the sand, his once immaculate blue uniform tattered and torn, blood encrusted in his once proud gray hair. The formidable colonel who used to stride across his plantation with the arrogant gait of a god, now a mere dying mortal stranded in the wilderness. He lifted his gaze towards me, his eyes retaining the same glacial coldness that once monitored my beatings. Yet now they were infused with a new emotion, desperation, raw and palpable. "Water," he croaked, his voice a mere whisper of its former booming resonance. "Please." I remained frozen, suspended between past and present, for what felt like an eternity, though it likely amounted to mere seconds. This was the architect of my suffering, the man who callously sold my pregnant wife to a merciless traitor, the one who branded his initials into my very flesh when I dared to dream of escape, the monster who declared me subhuman, a mere piece of property with legs, and now this vile creature was imploring me for mercy. My hand instinctively gravitated toward the canteen at my hip. Every fiber of my being recoiled, urging me to turn away and abandon him to wither and rot under the unforgiving desert sun. Justice would be served by watching him succumb to the same agonizing fate he had inflicted upon so many others. Yet, something held me back. Perhaps it was the rasping sound of his breath, so desperate and ragged. Perhaps it was the pathetic sight of him, reduced to nothing more than a dying creature in this unforgiving wilderness. "Do you recognize me?" I finally asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the simmering rage that burned within my chest. His eyes struggled to focus, and I witnessed the precise moment recognition dawned upon him. The remaining color drained from his already ashen cheeks, and his cracked lips began to tremble uncontrollably. "Ezra," he rasped, the name a mere exhalation. "That's right, Ezra Thorne, the boy you bought when I was 7 years old, the man you attempted to break for 28 long years." He closed his eyes, surrendering his head to the unforgiving embrace of the sand. For a fleeting moment I believed he had relinquished all hope, accepted his impending demise. But then he spoke once more, and his words resonated like a thunderclap, altering the very course of my being. "I know what you're contemplating, and you would be justified in leaving me to perish." He opened his eyes, his gaze locking onto mine. "But before you depart, there is something you must know concerning your wife." My blood turned to glacial ice. Sarah had been gone for 15 years, torn from my arms and sold when our baby was born. What could he possibly possess that would matter now after all this time? Yet, as I looked down upon this broken, pathetic shell of a man, I realized he held one last potent card, and despite the ocean of pain and suffering he had inflicted upon me, I needed to know its contents. The word struck me with the force of a physical blow, stealing the very air from my lungs. Sarah. He was talking about Sarah, and the way he uttered her name ignited a volcano of fury that I thought had long been dormant, buried deep within the recesses of my soul. "What about my wife?" The words escaped my lips as a primal growl. Whitfield attempted to raise himself onto his elbows, but his strength failed him, and he collapsed back onto the sand. Blood was seeping through his tattered shirt, emanating from what appeared to be savage arrow wounds to his side and shoulder. The Apache had left him to die a slow, agonizing death, but not before subjecting him to unimaginable torture. "Water first," he gasped, his voice strained with pain. "Then I will reveal everything." Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, a final, desperate manipulation from a man who had dedicated his entire existence to controlling and exploiting others. But the mere mention of Sarah's name had reopened a wound that time could never fully heal. I knelt down beside him and held the water bottle to his parched lips, watching him drink with the desperate fervor of a man who had been wandering in the desert for days, a condition that was likely the truth. "Speak," I commanded, snatching the bottle away after he had merely moistened his throat. "She did not die in childbirth, as I led you to believe." The words tumbled out in a desperate rush, as if he feared I would abandon him before he could unburden himself of his secret. "The baby she lived to, a little girl." The desert fell into an eerie silence. Even the wind seemed to cease its relentless whisper. I felt as though someone had reached into my chest and mercilessly squeezed my heart until it ceased to beat. "You're lying. I sold them both to a family in Santa Fe, the Rodriguezes. They were in need of domestic help and desired a child." His voice was gaining strength as the water coursed through his ravaged system. "Sarah has been alive all this time, Ezra. And your daughter, too. She would be 15 years old now." I rose to my feet so rapidly that the blood drained from my head, leaving me momentarily blind. 15 years. 15 years of believing they were deceased, of carrying the crushing weight of their supposed demise like a leaden stone in my chest. 15 years of envisioning Sarah's lifeless body in some unmarked grave, her innocent child rotting beside her. Why? The word was barely audible, a mere whisper carried on the wind. "Because you attempted to escape with her. Because you needed to be taught a lesson about the consequences of my property daring to flee." He was looking directly into my eyes now, and for the first time since I had stumbled upon him, he resembled the old Marcus Whitfield, cold, calculating, and utterly devoid of empathy. "And because the Rodriguezes paid me $500 for both of them." The surge of rage that erupted within me was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was a pure, blinding, white-hot fury that blurred my vision and clenched my hands into fists. This man had not only robbed me of my freedom, he had stolen my family and forced me to grieve for specters. I could end his life right now, wrap my hands around his throat and squeeze until those cold, lifeless eyes went dark forever. No one would ever know. The desert would silently claim his bones and I could ride away, believing I had finally achieved a semblance of justice. But if what he was saying held even a kernel of truth, if Sarah was truly alive, residing somewhere in Santa Fe. "You are going to tell me precisely where they are," I said, my voice deceptively calm, yet laced with a deadly undertone. "Every detail, and then you are going to assist me in finding them." Whitfield actually smiled, a grotesque, blood-tinged grimace that stretched across his pain-ridden face. "That might prove challenging considering I can barely stand. Then I suggest you find the strength." My gaze swept across the vast expanse of desert stretching in every direction. We were at least 2 days' ride from the nearest town, perhaps 3 if we were forced to travel on foot. The Apache who had attacked his party could still be lurking in the vicinity, and I possessed only enough water for one person to survive the journey. But if there was even a sliver of a chance that Sarah was still alive, that my daughter was growing up somewhere oblivious to the fact that her father still breathed, then I would carry this broken man across the very pits of hell to obtain answers. The central question was whether Marcus Whitfield would remain alive long enough to impart them to me. I made a decision that would have seemed utterly inconceivable just an hour earlier. I was going to save the life of the man I loathed more than any other in this world. Not out of compassion, not out of forgiveness, but because Marcus Whitfield was the only person alive who held the key to reuniting me with my family. "Can you walk?" I asked. Though judging by his condition, I already knew the answer. "Not far," he admitted, attempting to push himself up once more. This time he managed to attain a sitting position, but I could clearly see the immense effort it was costing him. Beads of sweat glistened on his forehead, despite the desert heat that was already beginning to dissipate as evening approached. I returned to where I had tethered my horse and retrieved my bedroll and the meager supplies I possessed. One half-empty water bottle, some dried jerky, and a handful of rock-hard biscuits. Enough for one man to reach civilization, perhaps. Upon my return, I found Whitfield examining his wounds. The arrow had passed cleanly through his shoulder, but the one lodged in his side remained deeply embedded. Dark blood had saturated his shirt and was already attracting swarms of flies. "That arrow needs to come out," I stated. "I know." He looked up at me, his eyes reflecting an emotion I had never witnessed within their depths before, real, honest fear. "But if you extract it improperly, I'll bleed out and die." "I'm well aware." I knelt beside him and meticulously examined the wound. The arrowhead was buried deep, likely in contact with bone. One wrong move could sever a vital artery. Lucky for you, I possess some experience in this area. It was the unvarnished truth. 28 years spent on a plantation had imparted more knowledge regarding the treatment of injuries than any man should ever possess. Whip lacerations, knife wounds, fractured bones resulting from so-called accidents that were anything but. We had learned to tend to one another because summoning a doctor for enslaved people was deemed a wasteful extravagance. "This is going to cause you excruciating pain," I warned. "Just do it." I gripped the arrow shaft tightly and felt him tense beneath my hands. With one swift, decisive motion, I snapped off the feathered end, then forced the arrow completely through his side until the point emerged from his back. Whitfield emitted a piercing scream that I was certain could be heard by every Apache within a 10-mile radius. Yet, he remained conscious, and more importantly, no significant blood vessels had been severed. I tore strips from his shirt to create makeshift bandages, working with a feverish urgency as the sun continued its descent toward the horizon. Desert nights were notoriously brutal, especially for wounded men. "Why?" he asked abruptly. "Why what? Why are you assisting me after everything I subjected you to? Why aren't you simply leaving me here to die?" I finished securing the bandage and sat back on my heels. The question I had been grappling with since I first offered him water. "Because 15 years ago, you informed me that my wife and daughter were dead. You allowed me to grieve for them. You allowed me to believe I was utterly alone in this world." I rose to my feet and looked down at him. "And now you are telling me that they are alive. So until I know with certainty, until I find them or verify that they are truly gone, you are the most valuable thing in this desert. And after that?" I left the sentence unfinished, as I honestly did not know what I would do once I found Sarah. Would I abandon him in Santa Fe? Would I finally enact the revenge I had fantasized about for so many years? "We must move," I said, changing the subject. "The Apache might return to finish the job." As I aided him in rising to his feet, Whitfield seized my arm with unexpected strength. "There is something else, Ezra, regarding why I truly ventured out here." His eyes were intense, desperate. "I wasn't just traveling through. I was actively searching for you." The word struck me dumb. Marcus Whitfield had been hunting me across the desert? "What do you mean you were looking for me?" Or, he leaned heavily against my shoulder as I assisted him in standing, his breathing labored from the effort. "When the war concluded, when they emancipated all the slaves, I knew you would inevitably head west. You always spoke of California when you believed no one was listening. That was undeniably true. During the seemingly endless nights in the slave quarters, I used to regale the others with tales of the gold fields, of the opportunity to forge a new life if one could only escape the clutches of the old one. But how could he have known? I had to locate you." He paused, his face growing ashen. Before you disappeared forever. There are things you need to know, Ezra, things about your family that extend beyond merely their current location." I yearned to violently extract the answers from him, but he was barely able to stand. The sun had almost completely vanished, and the temperature was plummeting rapidly. We were in desperate need of shelter, and we required it immediately. I spotted a formation of rocks approximately 50 yards away that could provide a modicum of protection from the wind. It will have to suffice. Talk while we walk, I said, half carrying him across the sand. Your daughter, he began, his breath coming in ragged gasps with each step. She is not merely alive, she is exceptional, intelligent. The Rodriguezes have sent me letters over the years, providing updates on their well-being. You kept track of them? I had to. You see, when I sold them, I made a provision. If anything were to befall me, if I died or vanished, a letter would be delivered to your daughter on her 16th birthday. A letter that would reveal her true parentage and her origins. We reached the rocks, and I assisted him in settling into a small alcove that would offer some respite from the biting wind. My mind was racing, struggling to comprehend what he was conveying to me. Why would you do such a thing? Why would you want her to know about me? Whitfield remained silent for a long moment, staring out at the rapidly darkening desert. When he finally spoke, his voice was remarkably different, softer, almost contrite. Because I committed a grievous error 15 years ago, an error that has haunted me every single day since. He looked up at me, and in the fading light I could discern something I had never witnessed before in his eyes. Regret. Your wife did not merely give birth to your daughter, Ezra. She saved my life. What? The night she went into labor, a fire erupted in the main house. It started in the kitchen and spread with frightening speed. I was trapped upstairs, rendered unconscious by the suffocating smoke. Sarah could have fled, could have escaped amidst the chaos. Instead, she braved that burning inferno and dragged me to safety. I felt as though the ground were dissolving beneath my feet. This could not possibly be the truth. Sarah would never have jeopardized her life for Marcus Whitfield. You are lying! I wish I were. She pulled me out, then collapsed right there on the lawn. That is when the baby came. Right there in the dirt, with the house burning behind us. His voice cracked with emotion. And the first thing she said when it was over, when she was cradling your daughter, was, "Promise me you will allow her to grow up free." The pain in my chest was so intense that it stole my breath. I could envision it perfectly. Sarah, brave and selfless to the very end, concerned about our child's future even in her moment of greatest vulnerability. So, I made that promise. And then, like a coward, I broke that promise the very next day when I sold them both. If you were Ezra, what would you do? Forgive a man who saved your family but destroyed your life? Or make him pay for 15 years of lies and grief? There is more, Whitfield whispered, and his next words impacted me with the force of a physical blow. Your daughter's birthday is tomorrow, which means if I die out here, she will never receive that letter, and she will never know that her father spent 15 years believing she was dead while she grew up believing he had abandoned her. Tomorrow. My daughter's 16th birthday was tomorrow, and she would receive a letter that would either reunite us or shatter any possibility of us ever finding one another. The weight of that knowledge settled upon my shoulders like an insurmountable burden. All these years, I had imagined her lifeless, interred in some forgotten grave. But she had been growing up, learning to read and write, blossoming into a young woman who did not even know her father's name. How can I be certain you are telling the truth? I asked, though a part of me already believed him. The details were too precise, too agonizing to be fabrications. Whitfield reached into his jacket with a trembling hand and produced a folded piece of paper. Even in the dim light, I could see that it was yellowed with age. This is a copy of the letter I composed for her. The original is with my attorney in Santa Fe, with instructions to deliver it tomorrow should I not return. I accepted the paper and unfolded it with extreme care. The writing was undeniably Whitfield's, the same meticulous script I had seen on bills of sale and punishment orders back on the plantation. But the words... Dear Elena, I read aloud, my voice catching on my daughter's name. Elena, she has a name. Your father's name is Ezra Thorne, and he is the bravest man I ever knew. He attempted to save you and your mother, and I punished him for it in ways that will forever stain my soul. If you are reading this, it means I am dead, and you are free to seek him out. He is likely in California by now, still believing you perished 15 years ago. Find him, child. Tell him that Marcus Whitfield spent his final years attempting to atone for the most heinous act he ever committed. My hands were trembling so violently that I could barely grip the paper. This broken man beside me had spent years orchestrating a reunion he might never witness. "There is an address," I said, squinting at the bottom of the letter. "Rodriguez family. Alama Street, Santa Fe. Miguel Rodriguez is a good man. He has treated them well, paid Sarah fair wages, ensured that Elena received an education. But they are not truly free, Ezra. Not while they remain bound by the contract I signed." The night was growing colder, and I could hear Whitfield's breathing becoming more labored. The wounds were exacting their toll, and we were still at least 2 days away from any semblance of civilization. I gazed up at the stars scattered across the desert sky and experienced something I had not felt in 15 long years. Hope. A terrifying, desperate hope that perhaps, just perhaps, I could still be a father to my daughter. "We depart at first light," I stated firmly. "Can you ride? If I can get you on my horse?" "I will have to." I pulled my bedroll around both of us, sharing what little warmth we had. The irony was inescapable. 15 years ago, I would have been brutally whipped for merely brushing against Marcus Whitfield's clothing. Now I was sustaining his life with my own body heat. "Ezra," he said quietly, "there is something else regarding Elena, something the Rodriguezes mentioned in their last letter." "What?" She had been asking incessant questions about her origins, why she does not resemble the rest of the family. Miguel suspects she knows she is not truly their daughter. The thought of my daughter pondering her roots, perhaps even clinging to the hope that her real parents were still alive, made my heart ache with a profound sadness. "We are going to reach Santa Fe," I said resolutely. "Both of us." But even as I uttered the words, I could feel Whitfield's fever intensifying, and I knew that tomorrow would test every last ounce of strength we both possessed. Dawn arrived both too soon and not soon enough. I barely slept, listening to Whitfield's labored breathing and scanning the horizon for any sign of Apache riders. When the first rays of light kissed the desert, I knew we were in dire straits. Whitfield's fever had spiked dramatically during the night. His skin burned to the touch, and he was mumbling incoherently about fires and promises and a little girl with my eyes. "Marcus?" I shook him gently. "We need to move." His eyes fluttered open, but they were glassy and unfocused. "Sarah? Is that you?" My heart constricted. Even in his delirium, he was thinking about my wife, about the night she saved his life and altered everything. "It is Ezra. We need to get to Santa Fe." It took every ounce of my strength to haul him to his feet and even more to hoist him onto my horse. He swayed precariously in the saddle, and I knew he would not last long riding alone. I secured him to the saddle with strips torn from my shirt, then began walking, leading the horse across the relentless expanse of sand and rock. The sun was already beating down with brutal force, even though it was barely past sunrise. "Tell me about her," I said as we walked, desperately trying to keep him conscious. "Tell me about Elena." "Smart," he mumbled. "So smart that it frightens Miguel sometimes. She devours every book she can get her hands on, writes letters to the newspaper advocating for women's rights and fair treatment for Mexican workers." Despite everything, I felt a surge of immense pride. My daughter was a fighter, just like her mother. "She possesses your stubborn streak," Whitfield continued, his voice growing fainter with each passing moment. "Last year, she convinced Miguel to start paying the other house servants' wages instead of merely providing them with room and board. She said that no one should be forced to work without compensation regardless of their circumstances." The irony cut deep. My daughter was championing the very freedom I had been denied my entire life. By midday, the heat was becoming utterly unbearable. My water was nearly depleted, and Whitfield had not spoken in over an hour. I could discern a line of green in the distance, signifying water. Perhaps a small stream or spring, but it was still miles away. Then, I heard the sound that chilled me to the bone. Hoofbeats, multiple horses moving at a rapid pace. I swiftly guided my horse behind a cluster of rocks and pulled Whitfield down from the saddle. He was barely conscious, his breathing shallow and rapid. "Stay quiet," I whispered, though I doubted he could even hear me. 3 Apache warriors crested the ridge approximately 200 yards away. They were following our trail, and they were moving with the deliberate patience of hunters who knew their prey could not escape. I was faced with two agonizing choices: engage 3 trained warriors with a single revolver and likely perish, leaving Elena to perpetually wonder about the fate of her father, or surrender and hope they would be satisfied with plundering whatever meager supplies we possessed. But as I observed them splitting up to encircle our position, I realized they were not interested in taking prisoners. The first warrior materialized from around the left side of the rocks, his rifle already raised. I shot him before he could fire, the sound reverberating across the desert like a thunderclap. The other 2 emerged from different directions, forcing me to decide which one to confront first. I spun toward the sound of running feet and fired twice, striking the second warrior in the chest, but the third one was already upon me. We crashed to the ground, wrestling in the sand and battling for control of his knife. He was younger than me, stronger, and he had not spent the entire morning traversing the desert. Just as the blade began its descent toward my throat, a gunshot erupted. The Apache warrior convulsed and fell sideways, blood spreading across his shirt. Behind him, Marcus Whitfield sat propped against a rock, a smoking pistol clutched in his trembling hand. "Could not let them kill you," he gasped. "Not when you are so close to finding her." The effort had utterly depleted him. Blood was flowing freely from his wounds once more, and his face was ashen. "How far to Santa Fe?" he asked. I looked toward the green line on the horizon, attempting to gauge the distance and time against the deteriorating condition of the man who held the key to my daughter's whereabouts. Perhaps 6 hours, if we push hard. I do not have 6 hours, Ezra. We both knew it to be the truth. But as I gazed upon this dying man who had both destroyed my life and then dedicated his final years to attempting to mend it, I made a decision that surprised us both. "Then I suppose I will have to carry you." I fashioned a makeshift travois from the Apache weapons and what remained of my meager gear, dragging Marcus Whitfield across the unforgiving desert like a piece of burdensome cargo. Each step was sheer agony, each mile a painful testament to the desperate need for the answers that only he could provide. The green line I had spotted earlier materialized into a small creek, barely a trickle but enough to replenish my water bottle and moisten Whitfield's cracked lips. He was fading rapidly, his skin assuming the waxy pallor of a man slipping from the grasp of the mortal realm. "Ezra," he whispered as I knelt beside the life-giving water, "I need to confide in you something else regarding why I truly sought you out." I did not want to hear any more confessions, any more revelations that would further complicate the simple, uncomplicated hatred I had harbored for 15 long years. But I also could not afford to relinquish any information that might assist me in finding Sarah and Elena. "Speak. I have been dying for months. The doctor in Richmond informed me that I had perhaps 6 weeks remaining." He coughed, and blood stained his lips. "Cancer, consuming me from within." That explained why he had recklessly gambled everything to venture out here alone. A dying man with nothing left to lose but the crushing weight of his conscience. "So you resolved to cleanse your conscience before you met your maker?" "Partly?" His eyes locked onto mine, clearer now than they had been all day. "But primarily because Elena deserves to know her father before it is irrevocably too late. And because Sarah—" He paused, struggling with words that seemed too heavy for his failing voice. "Sarah compelled me to swear something else that night she salvaged my life." "What?" "She made me promise that if I ever encountered you again, I would divulge the complete truth about everything. Not just regarding their survival, but regarding why I evolved into the man I became, regarding what instilled such cruelty within me." I did not want to hear this. Comprehending Marcus Whitfield, perceiving him as anything other than a monster, would only exacerbate the already complicated situation. "My father owned slaves," he continued, disregarding my silence. "And when I was 7 years old, one of them attempted to escape with his family. My father forced me to witness their brutal whipping, made me assist in tying the ropes, said it would educate me about property and control. The parallel struck me like a physical blow. 7 years old, the same age I had been when Whitfield purchased me. I swore that I would never become like him. But fear transforms us all into cowards, Ezra. Fear of losing everything. Fear of not being strong enough. Fear of admitting when you are wrong. His voice was fading with each word. I became precisely what I despised. As late afternoon descended, I could discern the adobe buildings of Santa Fe shimmering in the distance like a deceptive mirage. My shoulders screamed from the strain of dragging the makeshift travois. My lips were cracked and bleeding, but we were going to make it. Alama Street, Whitfield mumbled. Third house from the corner, blue door. I am aware, you already told me. Did I mention the garden Elena planted? Roses that Sarah taught her how to care for? He was drifting into delirium once more, lost in fragmented memories. She writes letters to you, Ezra, every week for 5 years. Letters she never sends because she has no idea where you are. My daughter had been composing letters to me for 5 years. She had been pouring her thoughts and feelings onto paper, desperately hoping that somehow they would reach a father she had never known. As we crested the final hill before Santa Fe, Whitfield seized my arm with surprising strength. "Promise me something," he gasped. "What?" "Do not allow her to read that letter until after you have had the opportunity to explain. Do not permit her to believe that you willingly abandoned them." The sun was setting as we reached the outskirts of town, painting the desert behind us in hues of blood and gold. Marcus Whitfield had managed to remain alive for the entirety of the arduous journey, driven by sheer willpower and the desperate need to see this final act of redemption through to its completion. But as I turned onto Alama Street and spotted the blue door just ahead, I realized that the most challenging part was only just beginning. So after all that, we're left with a story about the enduring power of family, the twisted paths to redemption, and how even in the face of unimaginable cruelty, hope can bloom in the most desolate landscapes. It's a reminder that the human heart is capable of both extraordinary darkness and breathtaking forgiveness, and that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not on battlefields but within ourselves. What did you think? What would you have done in Ezra's shoes? I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, and perspectives in the comments below. Let's get a conversation going. And if you enjoyed this story and want to explore more narratives that delve into the complexities of the human condition, please hit that subscribe button. We've got plenty more gripping stories on the way, and I wouldn't want you to miss out. Thanks for watching.